Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. As if learning one modern text, 15 poems, and being ready to analyse 2 unseen poems isn't enough, the AQA English Literature Paper 2 exam also requires you to make 2 crucial choices. Your choice of question in section A and your choice of comparative poem in section B. In this video I'll give you some advice on how to make the best choices. Now let's start by looking at section A. Most people study and inspect the calls for this section, so I'll use some sample questions for that text as an example in this video, but the same applies no matter what text you study. You'll be presented with 2 questions on your modern prose or drama text, and you'll need to choose one to answer. So the first question is, how do I choose which question to answer? Now it's human nature to have a gut reaction to the questions. Let me show you what I mean. Let's look at these 2. How does Priestley use the character of Sheila Burling to explore ideas about gender in an Inspector Calls? How does Priestley explore the importance of time in an Inspector Calls? Okay, so your gut reaction here might be that the first question is the hardest. It's restrictive, it's very narrowly focused, because it's not just about Sheila, and it's not just about gender. It's about how Sheila is used to present gender. And these tightly focused questions do put some people off. Some people like them, others are put off by them. The second question on time is more open. You could write about a number of different things there, but my advice is don't just assume your gut reaction was right and start writing your answer. Stop and pause and think. You might have one good idea for one of the questions that springs to mind, but one idea is not enough for a full answer. This is a 2-hour 15-minute exam worth a total of 96 marks, and that means you should spend around 1.5 minutes per mark available, so something like 50 minutes on section A, 40 minutes on section B, and 45 minutes on section C. Now if you're going to be spending 50 minutes on this question, even allowing 5 minutes to check your technical accuracy at the end for those 4 marks awarded for spelling, punctuation and grammar, you're going to need more than one good idea to write about. So I personally would recommend you ignore that gut reaction to the questions and give yourself just 30 seconds or so to think through each question. Think about what you know about the question. Think about the points you could make. If you feel confident on both, which question would allow you to make your most sophisticated points? Which question would allow you to present a conceptualized response, a line of argument, a hypothesis, which you can explore throughout your answer? So for me, I'd look at this question on Sheila and gender, and pretty quickly I'd realise there's a great answer I could write here, despite my first impressions. I'd look at society's expectations of women being different to society's expectations of men as presented through Sheila. How at first she's presented as immature, her reference to her parents as mummy and daddy infantilises her, she's presented as materialistic, looking at the engagement ring admiringly. I'd perhaps draw out the wider message of women being treated differently to men, looking at Priestley's message of inequality that we see throughout the play. I'd bring in some context about attitudes to women as well. But of course, Sheila changes throughout the play, and by the end refers to Mrs. Burling as mother. 2 simple words there, mummy, mother, which symbolise that change. I'd explore how by the end she's taken on not only the message of the inspector, but also his words. She mirrors his language of fire and blood and anguish when he's left, and her sentences grow in length from the beginning of the play to the end, and again linked to Priestley's message of how we are members of one body, we're responsible for each other, and being members of that one body includes different genders. Priestley's arguing that the inequality experienced by women is unjust. How any inequality is unjust is pretty much the whole message of the play, isn't it? Now with the time question, I might write about the choice to set the play at a different time to when it was written and why that matters, how the play takes place in one continual time frame, but I get the sense that my points would be more disjointed and not as conceptualized as the gender question. So for me, I would choose that first question. And once you make your choice, you want to stick to it. There's nothing worse than wasting 15 minutes on a question before realising it's not the one for you. Once you've chosen your question, stick to it, write out a plan. I go through why you should do that in my final tips video from a couple of days ago, and then write your answer. And just to say, the plan is for your benefit. It doesn't have to be written neatly in full sentences and that kind of thing. Here's an example from a 2018 paper. This is a full marks paper, and the student's plan here is pretty messy. they're writing in abbreviations, they're writing in single words, and it's all over the place, but it's for their benefit. It did what it was supposed to do. It enabled them to think, to plan, and order their thoughts. And just to say, this student put a line through their plan. You don't have to do that. You can do it if you feel better doing that, but you don't have to. And then you get writing. And I'm not going to go over how you should write your answer in this video. Check out my Literature Paper 2 playlist for more advice on that. Okay, let's move on to Section B. In Section B, you have another choice to make. You're presented with one poem and asked to compare it to a different poem. Now let me show you how I would personally choose that second poem with a sample question from Power and Conflict. Compare how poets present the reality of war, In Charge of the Light Brigade, and one other poem. Okay, so the first thing I would do here is to read through and annotate the named poem. Not annotate everything I remember about it, but anything I remember or even see for the first time that seems to be significant in light of the question about the reality of war. So I might immediately remember the repeated refrain and how this poem is a ballad. How a ballad is a form of poetry used to present a message which should be remembered. And in this poem there are really two messages. Number one, the bravery of the soldiers in the face of suffering at the hands of a more powerful enemy. And number two, the mistakes which led to their unnecessary deaths. So I would think about how the reality of war is that there is great bravery involved in the face of suffering, but also that the need for that suffering is in itself questionable. I might pick up the biblical imagery of the Valley of Death, linking to Psalm 23, the Psalm of David, and again think about the great bravery of the soldiers who, like David when he took on Goliath in the Bible, are fighting a foe where they are quite clearly the underdogs and suffer terribly as a result. And I might pick out that line, someone had blundered, and think about how this line breaks the use of dactylic dimeter to draw emphasis to the blunder, the mistake which led to the pointless massacre. And on it goes. So I'd have a strong grasp on the question. The reality of war is that it demands great bravery from those involved as they face unimaginable suffering, but it is ultimately unnecessary. And then with that in mind, I would think about my second poem. Now the names of the poems are printed in the question paper, so I would literally go through one by one and think about which poem would make a good comparison in light of the question I'm being asked. So Ozymandias, no, it's not about war. London, no, and on you go. And in this case I might choose Exposure. It definitely points out the suffering of the soldiers who suffer not at the hands of a great armed enemy, but at the hands of the weather, the iced east winds that knife us. But there's also a second similarity. The bravery and suffering is pointless because nothing happens. The way each stanza builds up structurally but then is anticlimactic at the end shows that. And by the way, all of these points I'm mentioning about the poems are covered in my poetry analysis videos. I've made videos on every single poem, so make sure you have a look at those. So the point is simple. Don't just rush in. Give yourself some time to think about your question in Section A and your second poem in Section B. And of course, I've not mentioned Section C, Unseen Poetry, in this video, but I do have 3 videos on that in my Literature Paper 2 playlist. If you found this video useful, please do subscribe to the channel.